Slobodan Milosevic, defiant for 2.5 months, has caved in to all the key demands of the forces ranged against him. Or at least he says so, and that's the problem the NATO alliance still has tonight. Most of the allies, and the Russians too, are in no doubt that there's been the breakthrough for peace they wanted. But before hostilities cease, they expect quick signs of compliance, especially a Serb withdrawal from Kosovo. Details of the terms presented to President Milosevic were conveyed to European leaders meeting in Cologne by the Finnish president, who, with Russia's envoy, had confronted the Yugoslav leader. From Cologne, our diplomatic correspondent, Brian Hanrahan.
With the war continuing and agreement to end it in sight, speed was essential. As the Finnish president arrived at Cologne airport, the American envoy who helped draft the terms was waiting in a car at the airport steps. The two men conferred on the drive into the city. There was little to say. Mr. Ahtisaari confirmed that the Serbs had accepted the proposals unchanged. It was, he told them candidly, the best offer they were going to get. The German Chancellor waited with an effusive greeting. Peace, he said, was very close. We have to make sure it doesn't slip through our fingers. President Ahtisaari said the bombing could now stop within a very few days, but that depended on how quickly others did their work.
Bear with me if I'm not jumping here with enthusiasm, because there's a lot of hard work that needs to be done, but I believe that, as I said, that the first step in building peace has been made.
Throughout the day, the European leaders had waited anxiously for news. Kosovo overshadowed all other business. When it started to come through, it was greeted with relief and suspicion. Nobody had expected such a quick surrender, and nobody will believe it until it's implemented.
I hope that we have achieved our aim. We've got to make sure, as I say, it's now put through. But I think the cause that we have is a just cause. I think we were right to take the action. And the moment of fulfillment for me will be when those refugees cross back over the border and can get back to their homeland.
The Prime Minister met representatives of the Kosovo Albanians here. For them, there are obligations as well as advantages in the agreement. The Kosovo Liberation Army will have to disarm. NATO will have to make sure they do. Over the next few days, there'll be a great deal of selective quoting from this agreement as everybody tries to put the best possible gloss on the outcome. But it certainly looks as though NATO has got just about everything it wanted. The plan calls for the Serbs to withdraw all their forces from Kosovo, for an international force to move in with NATO in a fundamental role. But afterwards, a token Serb force will be allowed to return, numbered in hundreds but not thousands. NATO bombing will stop only once Serb forces, beginning with their anti-aircraft batteries, are observed to be withdrawing.
Military action will not stop on the basis of an empty promise. We've seen President Milosevic too often in the past make promises and then lightly break them. The military action will stop when we see he is serious by taking action to carry out the agreement, and that's why the package that was put to him states that we will halt the action when we see verifiable evidence of him withdrawing his Serb forces from Kosovo.
Tonight, the European leaders were at dinner at Augustusburg Castle outside Cologne. But while they relaxed, the frantic process of pushing this agreement to completion has begun, drafting documents that will satisfy both NATO and the United Nations Security Council. Brian Hanrahan, BBC News, Cologne.
Milosevic accepted the deal after 72 days of NATO air raids. Some Serbs are describing it as capitulation, but the overriding desire of most of the population appears to be for peace, whatever the terms and conditions. Our World Affairs editor John Simpson reports on the atmosphere in Belgrade. His report has been seen but not changed by the Serb authorities.
As the streets of Belgrade empty out for the evening, just as they have throughout the last 11 weeks, there's a good chance that tonight at least there'll be no bombing. But no one's really celebrating. It's a melancholy feeling to think that your government has effectively surrendered. And so much has been destroyed here that could still be standing if President Milosevic had only accepted this same deal back in March. It was here, as the world's press gathered at the Serbian parliament, that the deal was effectively rubber-stamped. The parliament is heavily controlled by President Milosevic, and it had had its orders. We weren't allowed to film the session, and these official pictures don't reflect the anger of the occasion, nor the shouts of traitor. Those came from this man, the notorious extreme nationalist Vojislav Šešelj, who voted against accepting NATO's terms and said he'd resign as Vice Premier of Serbia. And indeed, the terms were fierce. A total Serbian withdrawal from Kosovo, a substantial NATO involvement in the force to take over there. After only an hour's debate and a vote of 136 for and 70 or so against, the members emerged, some jubilant, some angry, some just relieved it was all over.
Our people would never capitulate, but this government did.
This agreement is a capitulation?
Sure.
Why is it a capitulation?
Because our government accepted much more difficult agreement than that from Paris from 2 months and a half ago.
Near 100% of Serbian citizens will be happy with this accepting of joint proposal of Mr. Ahtisaari, Chernomirdin, and acceptance of our leadership.
Happiest of all was the erratic former Vice Premier, Vuk Drašković, sacked a month ago for urging a deal with NATO.
This is a great day for the peace and for the future of democracy and stability of Federal Republic of Yugoslavia and all this region.
Mr. Drašković senses a return to power now in a new, less extreme Milosevic government. If, that is, President Milosevic survives this whole business.
I do think this is the end of Milosevic, but this is not the first time that we are saying that Milosevic has problems and that period is basically like beginning of his end. Something like that we were saying after Croatian War and after Dayton in Bosnia and so on and so forth. And so far he managed to present his losses as his victories.
Outside, though, there was a familiar sound. A NATO jet broke the sound barrier overhead, setting off all the alarms, as if to remind everyone here that the war wouldn't finally be over until NATO said it was.
I think it's the beginning of the end, but we are dealing here with a professional escapologist, so I don't think it's a very good idea to start writing his epitaph quite yet. My sense of it is, though, from being out in the streets, talking to people today, is that a lot of the anger and the frustration that people used to feel towards NATO, they now are turning against President Milosevic, because everything they've gone through now just seems to have been completely pointless. The other thing here to say is that NATO and the EU are going to start pumping more money into the Balkans, and Serbia won't get any of it while he's around. They won't actually say you've got to get rid of President Milosevic, but it'll become obvious that everyone else is doing well out of all this while Serbia isn't. But as people found here a couple of years ago, it's one thing to want him to go, and it's altogether a different thing to make him go.
John Simpson in Belgrade, thank you. And our diplomatic correspondent Brian Hanrahan joins me now from Cologne, scene of the European summit. Brian, Mr. Ahtisaari has brought back from Belgrade the piece of paper, but how confident are the European leaders that it is the beginning of the peace?
I think rather against their better judgment, they think that it is. Mr. Milosevic, true to his reputation, has surprised them again. They didn't think that he would surrender so abruptly or so quickly, and yet he's done so, and they can't think of any reason why he should apparently give in like this if he doesn't intend to go through with it. There is, however, just one cloud on the horizon. Has he got something else up his sleeve? I mean, the problem in the past is once one crisis is settled, Mr. Milosevic creates another one, and that helps his survival. Montenegro is there within Yugoslavia. It's severely unstable. It's virtually defying his authority. Are we going to see something there? That is perhaps the one worry left, but they think they've probably pinned him down on this, but they'll demand proof every inch of the way.
First, we must have clarity that the Serbian leadership has fully accepted these conditions and intends to fully implement them. Until then, and until Serb forces begin a verifiable withdrawal from Kosovo, we will continue to pursue diplomacy, but we will also continue the military effort that has brought us to this point.
Before these Serb troops leave Kosovo, the deal still has to be finalised and sanctified by a UN Security Council resolution. That done, a timetable to end hostilities could be swiftly implemented. First, within 48 hours, Belgrade would remove its air defence weapons. Then, within 7 days, the 40,000 Serb troops in Kosovo would have to pull out. Then, to fill the vacuum, an international force of 50,000, including many NATO troops, would move in, essentially to take over Kosovo. Already these British troops, part of NATO's force on Kosovo's border, are poised for entry. Training for almost impassable terrain after 11 weeks of bombing, not to mention the Serb minefields. The breakthrough today, though, is agreement that NATO and Russian troops will work side by side, as they did in Bosnia. Once again, the Russian role will be to look after Serb interests. No doubt, despite all the devastation, all sides will claim victory. For Belgrade, just the fact Kosovo stays inside Yugoslavia is a triumph. But however President Milosevic dresses it up, he's an indicted war criminal whose grip on power once the war is over must be severely weakened. If confirmed, this peace deal is surely a defeat for him.